During the past semester, the APG5752 class has visited a number of media sites in Melbourne and in Sydney. This video diary breaks down the visits thematically, drawing insights and questions from each of the site visits. 4 major themes emerged this semester. They were ethics in communications and media, storytelling and understanding audiences, the effects of new media, and finally, ways to enter and succeed in a career in communications or media. Let's begin with ethics. Screen Australia presented a thorough presentation of their work and explained how they fund and support Australian media content. An ethical issue highlighted at this site was the diversity representation on Australian screens. In discussing the Seeing Ourselves and Gender Matters reports from 2015, Patrick May highlighted key statistics demonstrating the lack of diversity on screens in Australia. It was interesting to discuss quotas in relation to the amount of Australian content found in the media, and I wonder whether this idea could be applied to areas of diversity and then monitored by Screen Australia. Steve Kinane, a reporter at the ABC's Investigations Unit, touched on the ethics of grief reporting. While journalists provide an essential skill to the public, they also must be aware of the people they are reporting on and must ensure that they do not contribute to trauma experienced by those they choose to interview. At News Corp, Caroline Overington delivered a passionate piece about the liberties we have in Australia in regard to freedom of speech. She suggested that cartoons cannot do harm, which I felt was a privileged and simple viewpoint. However, I did agree with her assertion that people should speak out against things they do not agree with and that debating issues is important for a democratic society. Finally, during discussions with Andrew West from ABC's Radio National Religion and Ethics program, West suggested that there is a tension on Radio National about whether to produce stories that appeal to niche audiences fitting in with a new media model while maintaining ABC's mandate to take special interest stories and make them interesting to the public. Storytelling was at the heart of many of the discussions across various sites. Peter Lewis from Essential Media stated that human lives aren't built on logic and numbers, but rather are built on stories, and that when telling a story it is important to know the audience, have a message and base the story around a person. This sentiment was echoed at a number of media sites. At BuzzFeed, Marnie Cordell emphasised that news is taken seriously. She too suggested that a character should be kept at the front of the story. And when imagining an audience, a journalist has to remember that this may be the first time someone is coming across a news story. I was impressed by the rigour described by Cordell and by the independence the Australian office of BuzzFeed has from the US head office. Similar themes were echoed at Junkee. This could be because BuzzFeed and Junkee share a predominantly young, female audience with a similar goal to report national news despite being based in Sydney. I found it interesting that Rob Scott said that Junkee was not trying to compete with the breaking news cycle, but rather wished to explain the news. This feels at odds with stereotypical new media ideas around staying on top of current trends. Rather, Junkee will slow down and delve into more depth in their storytelling. New South Wales Health's social marketing department views storytelling slightly differently. For them, storytelling is not enough. They are attempting to enact changes in behaviour. Their presentation provided theories and models that warrant further investigation. It was also interesting to see their use of various ways to communicate with diverse audiences. Clearly, to deliver health messages, audience demographics change the stories being told and the outcomes expected from social marketing campaigns. Andy Neal made an excellent point on storytelling. He stated that to stand out, young professionals should present positive stories on people who are normally viewed in a negative light, use new ways of telling stories on new platforms, and shouldn't wait but rather do it themselves. New ways of storytelling presented a number of changes and challenges to the sites we visited. Comparing the 3 television sites, Channel 9 was the only one to use an automated camera system. While at all 3 sites, Channel 9, The Project, and at Q&A, television was recorded and viewed live, I was amazed at the amount of pre-recorded content, particularly at The Project, and how seamlessly it fitted into the live content. Each of the shows were created for television, and it would be interesting to compare their staff, production timelines, equipment, etc. with online content makers. Both Fairfax and News Corp discussed their online editions of their newspapers. Fairfax saw its online audience as increasingly valuable, however, relies on revenue from the printed version of the paper to be able to try new ventures online. At News Corp, they are specifically creating stories to go online that aren't ever printed in hardcopy form. Steve Watson, the commercial editor at News Corp, also acknowledged that the amount of time people spend reading news online is limited and fluctuates during the day. With increasing ways to measure these fluctuations combined with the 24-hour news cycle, it would be interesting to see how traditional and new media news outlets change their tactics to appeal to audiences. Endemol Shine create television content which is sold to Australian networks or licensed to overseas markets. Endemol Shine's business model is sustained by new media affordances. They do not own studios but rather create teams and hire spaces as needed for each project. This contract style of work suggests to me that there is an instability in working in media and causes me to think about ways to ensure a steady workflow and stand out in a competitive professional market. The final theme discussed across the various sites was skills needed for careers in the communications and media industry. I found the experiences of being inside TV and radio stations immensely interesting. I was curious at the behind-the-scenes workings, how many people were involved in production, and the timelines on which content is produced. It did affirm for me, however, that I would be more interested in a behind-the-scenes role rather than as someone directly involved in production. I was unaware of the competitive nature of the media industry.
Therefore, it was valuable to learn at multiple media sites that the regional
Media companies allow young professionals to develop a range of skills. This was echoed by the presenters at Southern Cross Austereo. This site was my favourite visit, as I was surprised at the amount of valuable information that we received. The presenters discussed matching roles with your previous experience, being proactive and creative, finding ways to stand out, and having a relentless passion to achieve. The professional insight given at this site will be invaluable in the coming years as I enter the workforce. All of the site visits in Melbourne and Sydney provided interesting insights into the media and communications landscape in Australia, and affirmed that I have chosen an industry that I am passionate about, will allow for flexibility and is adaptable to change.